numerous other globally recognized IMM standards and frameworks enable the use of tailored yet relatable approaches for different needs, contexts, and stakeholders. For the first time in Türkiye, this virtual panel brings together the professionals of the other most prominent IMM standards and the frameworks. I would like to invite Ms. Sanem Yalçıntaş, Director of Research, Technology and Innovation at TED University, to moderate this fruitful panel.
Dear guests, welcome. It's really great to see your energy so high still, considering the time of the day. So I'm Sanem. I'm working as Director of Research, Technology and Innovation at TED University. And before starting to this panel, I would like to share you some backstage information. So in designing this panel, structuring the workshops, the panels, the speakers, we try to stick with some principles. And these principles was, the first one was to include all the key partners across the ecosystem, and also to highlight, bring forward the most prominent approaches or practices around the world. So you might imagine this is a little bit tough thing to do, because considering all the great practices around the world is distributed so widely. So we came up with the most innovative approach to host all these different approaches and standards and some frameworks from the leading figures around the world into a virtual workshop. So, not a workshop, a panel. And it's an offline virtual panel, and it eliminates the, or lower to a great extent, the carbon footprint. And also, we wanted the panelists to shoot some videos together with their presentations and send to us. Now, it will be a first time for me, and I assume it will be also a first time for you. So let's see how it unfolds. So this is the chair which we thought that the most proper to moderate a virtual offline panel. It's standing right between the organic world and the digital world, and I'm going to take part on this stage. So we're going to start with Karim Harji. We're going to have 6 leading figures around the globe. The first one is Karim from Oxford Impact Measurement Program. So I would like to first provide some short bio of Karim to you. And we asked some questions to Karim beforehand, and I'm going to share them with you. So Karim Harji is the program director of Oxford Impact Measurement Program at the Saïd Business School, University of Oxford. He is also the managing director of Evalysis, which works with boards and management teams to clarify their impact aspirations and strategies, align their measurement and management approaches, and navigate the complexity of data and decisions. So Karim has made influential contributions to advanced knowledge and practice in social impact measurement and impact investing. He has published on industry trends and innovative practices, supported field-building initiatives to promote the value and integrity of impact measurement, and designed education and training programs across the established and emerging markets. So, as a pioneer in the field, we asked Karim some key questions, starting from the fundamentals of IMM. So we asked him to provide some information about the role of IMM and how is the field evolving. How can an impact investor or a business decide which guidelines and frameworks to choose is the ultimate question. We all try to find some answers. And what are the advantages of being an early adopter? Because it's a difficult thing. And what are the risks and obstacles that people or businesses may experience when measuring their impact? So, are we ready? Okay, let's see how it unfolds.
I'm Harji from the Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford, and it is my pleasure to provide some introductory remarks to this panel on standards and frameworks for IMM. I'm going to talk about how I see IMM, introduce you to some of the concepts and questions that the field is working through, situate some of these standards and frameworks and how they've evolved, and present the opportunity for IMM looking forward. According to the common definition from the GIN and the IMM includes both identifying and considering the positive and negative effects of one's business or investments on people and planet. What we're trying to do is mitigate any of the negative effects and maximize the positive effects in alignment with the goals and capital that we are deploying. I'll talk a bit more about some of the trends, but what we're seeing is greater demand for clarity of impact goals as well as data. Many more approaches and tools and frameworks, and there's increasing interoperability between. Unsurprising, there are different stakeholders, multiple objectives, and different use cases for IMM. One of the things that distinguishes IMM is the concept of impact management. It's not just about looking back at what happened around what impact you had, but also to look ahead at how to make decisions to maximize your impact in the future, given your context, capabilities, and resources. Now, if we think about the concept of impact measurement more broadly, I'd encourage us to think about this in a few ways. The first is framing impact measurement as a toolkit rather than a singular standard or approach or framework. We're thinking about developing a toolkit that includes principles, approaches, standards, processes, all of which allow us to make better judgments of what a project or investment or portfolio has achieved in terms of social or environmental changes. Both the research and practice are still in the early days of professionalizing this field, but we've seen a lot of progress in the last decade. However, there are a few conventions on how to handle this plurality of stakeholders and recognize that there's still a bit of ambiguity in the way that we define concepts, tools, and frameworks, but also increasingly greater shared language, adoption of key standards and norms and practices. The key point, though, is when we think about what impact measurement and management looks like, it's a dynamic activity. We're looking back, but we're also looking ahead. And we'll also want to look beyond the things that we typically would be looking at when we count things. So some of the impacts we might look at are quite tangible and obvious and reportable. In other cases, we have to go beyond that to think about the strategic implications and ways we add new value as a result of the insights we're getting from IMM. We can think about this in terms of three different aspects or principles of IMM. The first is that impact investors need to articulate their intentions. You have to be clear about why you're measuring and who is measuring. You also want to be able to integrate those considerations around impact at each stage of how you make investment decisions. We want to be able to value this and integrate it all parts of our process to ensure that it gets the attention it deserves. And increasingly, we're asking questions around integrity. Are we really doing what we say? The data that we use to support the claims we make valid, reliable, and verifiable? These three principles are particularly important because impact investors are often clear about their intentions. They're getting better at integrating impact considerations at all stages of the impact process. Now they're being held to account around impact integrity to ensure that the claims that they're making are backed up by the right kinds of evidence, data, and transparency. Over the last decade, we've seen a lot of movement and shifts in IMM. And the GIN has recently put out a summary of some of these trends that are presented here. The first is that we can see that investors tend to rely on the scale of the problem and the broad issue areas when defining impact priorities, while investee objectives and data play a greater role when investors set specific target. Now we see this when impact investors have broad theories of change that are often related to sectors or thematic issues. However, when it comes down to transaction level, we're often quite specific around what we expect in terms of data, reporting, and disclosure. On the standards front, we've seen a lot more shift towards using common frameworks and standards. These include the Sustainable Development Goals for overall strategy and direction, IRIS Plus metrics and indicators for specific measurement and objectives, and IMP as the language being adopted around IMM. We also see that IMM is being increasingly valued by investors, both in terms of the attention and the skills that are being directed towards it. We know that investors are beginning to use impact data that they're collecting, but there's still some questions around how to move from measurement to management and tensions between financial considerations and impact consideration. One of the notable gaps, according to this research, is that impact investors don't typically engage with end stakeholders, but may have conversations with investees on a variety of different things, including impact performance. And we're beginning to see some shifts towards using verification around impact practice, much less so around performance. The overall picture is one of increasing evolution, sophistication, and activity around IMM. There's been a lot of progress around standards, tools, and frameworks, much more activity, adoption, and integration. And now the big questions are around impact integrity, participation, and the use of IMM findings for decision-making and both strategy and governance. There are a number of different starting points that investors typically use. Talked about the SDGs, the IMP norms, but also others like the operating principles for impact management, UNPRI, and the SDG impact standards. On the tools and systems side, we see IRIS being used quite a bit, as well as other efforts, SASB and G4I, and a number of sector-specific or segment-specific platforms and tools. The good news is that regardless of where you are in your journey around IMM, one of these areas is an obvious starting point. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and there are a lot more examples now than we had even 5 years ago. Increasingly, the guidance around what to pick, what is appropriate when, and how to use them is becoming available as well. This is an example from the Impact Management Platform, which has a great systems map for both organizations as well as for investors. Encourage you to check those out because it provides some good wayfinding among the range of different frameworks, tools, and approaches. So in my final remarks, I want to summarize the opportunity more broadly around IMM. I would say if you're not already doing this, you're behind. Increasing mainstream attention, regulators are going to be asking questions, both in capital market as well as around social impact. And so you should be paying attention and already beginning to use these tools and frameworks. You should also encourage engagement across your organizations with many of these initiatives and approaches. It shouldn't be just one person's job or even one team's job. Staff across all types of organizations are increasingly interested in issues of impact, purpose, and mission. They should be encouraged to get to know many of these platforms, tools, and frameworks, including the ones that will be presented, and to also think about the ways in which they can be applied in unique and creative ways to the work that you do. And my two final remarks are around reframing what IMM is. Sometimes we conflate IMM with reporting, and I think it's important to go beyond reporting to think about how we can uncover new value and opportunities from doing this well. In this way, IMM is strategic. And the other myth or challenge is this notion that IMM is difficult. I don't think it's difficult. I think change management is difficult. And we know that IMM has behavioral and relational components to it. And so when we think about what the opportunity for IMM is, there are a lot of starting points, easy to get started, there's a community behind you, there are a lot of options. You should go beyond the reporting agenda and think about the strategic implications. But equally, you should consider this as a change management exercise where you have the opportunity to uncover new value, new insights, and to get even better around how you link all parts of your organization in service of greater impact for people and planet. Thank you.
So thank you, Karim. Lots of things that needs to be considered. So the last portion really struck me. IMM is not difficult, but change management is true. And yes, we'll see how we all together, all the actors in the ecosystem will deal with change management because it includes some behavioral change, some cultural transformation, so it's really important. Okay, our second guest is Nicolas Gemio, B Labs movement, B Corp movement. So we're going to hear from Nicolas Gemio, Nico. But first, I would like to share you some brief information about his background. So Nico works as a market development executive at B Lab Europe. He supports the movement's country partners and expands the community of certified B Corps across the borders. More specifically, he serves as a guide for organizations in countries where the B Corp movement is in its early stages, including Türkiye and also the Balkans and the Baltics. And Nico holds a degree in politics, philosophy, and economics, and is also the founder of a great enterprise, Urban Green Club. It's a social enterprise aimed at accelerating the transition towards sustainability through urban gardening. And now we asked Nico to explain us the B Corp movement and how has this certification influenced the behavior and practices of B corporations, and what are the key benefits they experience from obtaining this certification. Also, a very tricky question, how we wanted to learn to share his insights with us to how they ensure that the assessment framework remains relevant and also impactful for businesses across different sectors and regions. This is a very important insight he's going to share with us soon. And we wanted him to share some success stories and also some case studies of B corporations that have significantly improved their social and environmental performance through their engagement with B Lab and the B Impact Assessment. So let's hear about Nico.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicolas Gemio. I work at B Lab Europe, and I'm delighted to talk to you today at this Impact Measurement and Management Summit. I would be even more delighted to be there with you in person in Ankara, but I've heard that there might be one or two of the Turkish certified B Corps in the room, so that makes me very happy. My goal over the next few minutes is to try to keep your attention as I introduce you to the B Corp movement, B Lab standards, and how they come to life. For those of you who don't know it, the B Corp movement is a global growing movement of individuals shifting our economic system from profiting only a few to benefiting all. From concentrating wealth and power to ensuring equity, from extraction to regeneration, and from prioritizing individualism to embracing what we call interdependence. At B Lab, as an organization, our vision is that of an inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic system for all people and the planet. We know it's a very ambitious vision, and that's why we have to tackle it through different angles. Our first strategy is to drive the adoption of sustainability standards. That's our main goal as an organization. Second, we certify companies. In other words, we verify the impact that they have measured. Third, we broadcast business as a force for good. We share stories of positive impact from B Corps and non-B Corps. Fourth, we put resources into and we hire people for catalyzing policy change, so influencing policy making, so that one day all business has to be a force for good by law. And fifth, more broadly, we develop networks of local, regional, and global communities for change. And that's also what we're doing here today, just by coming together. Who we are actually a network of organizations. The standards development happens at BLab Global, but there is a network of global partners across 6 different continents, and we spread the standards, and to some extent we support organizations in their implementation. This is our team in Amsterdam at the BLab Europe office. The reason why I showed this on screen is because we are there for you. We are the point of contact for all organizations in Turkey that are using the B Impact Assessment or pursuing B Corp certification. But enough about us. Let's dive into what makes BLab standards different. The standards are comprehensive and positive. They're comprehensive because they span across 5 different impact areas, so they're quite holistic. Those areas are governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And the standards are positive because the main focus is on rewarding companies for positive practices, as opposed to penalizing them for not implementing certain practices. And this is very much in line with our philosophy of continuous improvement. They are standardized and adaptive. Standardized because the same key topics apply for every company, but depending on where they are incorporated in the world, their sector and their size, it's also quite adaptive. So there are more than 100 different versions of the standards and the assessment. The standards are objective and dynamic. They are developed through elaborate stakeholder consultation and overseen by an independent advisory council. And they're dynamic because they're continuously evolving. The last version was launched in January 2019 with significant improvements to the framework. Last but not least, we think of BLab standards as inspiring and educational. Inspiring because they're rigorous, they are ambitious. There has been more than 150,000 companies using the assessment, but out of those only 7,000 have successfully achieved B Corp certification. And the standards are educational because, as I always say to companies, the more they use them, the more ideas they will get about things that they can improve on, and very often these are things that they can implement right away. Work has been done on understanding the differences and similarities between BLab standards and other standards. In particular, I can recommend different pieces of content around the complementarity between GRI standards and BLab standards, and you can find that on our website. As I said a moment ago, the standards are continuously evolving. The last iteration started last year. We opened up a public consultation in September. There has been different phases, and that consultation is now coming to an end. And next year we will see new standards and a new assessment coming to life for all organizations. In this consultation process, we have been speaking to more than 50 external topical experts. We have been speaking to 450 B Corps covering all regions, sizes, and sectors. The consultation has also been open to non-B Corps. We have been speaking to standards advisory groups covering 6 geographical regions, and of course the Standards Advisory Council, which is the council that governs BLab standards, and there are 15 or so people in it. None of them work at BLab, and I encourage you to look it up and see their backgrounds and profiles, because they are very impressive. All of this comes to life in the B Impact Assessment, the free online tool that BLab makes available for organizations. The philosophy behind it is that we can't improve on what we don't measure. And that's why the first thing that the assessment does is obviously allowing organizations to measure across the 5 different impact areas. We're talking about around 200 questions. It also allows for benchmarking. Organizations can compare their performance against the performance of other organizations in the same sector, size, or region. And all the features are geared to facilitate continuous improvement. None of this would matter without the community of plus 7,000 B Corps around the globe and how they come together, how they collaborate, innovate, create opportunities for each other. There are 7 of these B Corps in Turkey at the moment and a few others coming up in the certification review process. How do we safeguard the integrity of our standards? We have different mechanisms. The first one is a disclosure questionnaire, a questionnaire that all companies have to fill in along with the assessment in order to submit for certification. Second, risk reviews and background checks that are run on all companies pursuing certification. We also have what we call eligibility reviews and controversial industry statements. We encourage organizations from all industries to use the assessment, but not all industries can pursue certification at present. There are additional baseline requirements for companies with very high revenues. For example, the requirement to make their assessment answers publicly available online. And all of this repeats every 3 years in the recertification cycles. Our last mechanism is a public complaint procedure, which is very thorough and transparent, and you can read all about it on our website. To end on a positive note, I invite you to visit videochange.com, which is the platform for thought leaders and active participants of the community of people using business as a force for good. It's our blog, and maybe, hopefully, your organization will be featured there soon. Let's get to work. I wish you the very best in your impact journey ahead. I encourage you to sign up to one of our upcoming open webinars. I would love to connect with you there, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thanks, Nico. Yes, Nico, he deserves. So we really appreciate the great work B-Lab and B Corp community is doing for the sake of IMM and also impact, providing, securing positive impact. So now we're going to host Andrea Serra from the International Foundation for Valuing Impact. She is the Chief Market Development Officer at IFVI, and also she has over 12 years of experience in sustainability, international development, and multi-stakeholder partnership. So there is a project that Andrea has been implementing at Harvard Business School. The project's name is Impact Weighted Accounts Project. So we wanted Andrea to share some information about the activities of this project and what are the key challenges in implementing this, and how can companies and investors overcome this challenge, and what role do you see for regulators, for example, and standard setting bodies in advancing the adoption of impact-weighted accounts, and how can they encourage the widespread adoption without imposing undue burdens on companies. So we're going to hear about Andrea. Yes.
Hello everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this very important event. My name is Andrea Serra, and I'm the Chief Market Development Officer at the International Foundation for Valuing Impacts, or IFVI. And today I will be talking about impact accounting and the important role that impact accounting has to play in terms of fundamentally changing the way in which our current economic system creates and measures value. So a little bit about IFVI. We are a non-for-profit organization that grew out of the Impact-Weighted Accounts project at Harvard Business School. In 2022, we were launched as an independent organization with the goal of taking the work of the Impact-Weighted Accounts project, the framework and the data sets, to bring them to greater implementation and to scale. Our direction is to build a global impact economy, which can address the enormous social and environmental challenges that we face today by integrating impact valuation into financial analysis, into capital allocation, and into decision making. The way that we are advancing impact valuation right now is through the development of monetary impact accounting and standardized impact calculations, through the development of practical guidance and tools to drive adoption and scale of impact valuation, and lastly, by advocating for the global adoption of monetary impact accounting into regulation and by standard setters. Our theory of change basically rests on 4 key principles. So number 1, the fact that we think impact can be measured and compared across companies through standardized calculations. Number 2, we believe that public reporting of impact is absolutely necessary for the type of economic paradigm shift that we need. Number 3, that monetary impact accounting is both cost effective and decision useful. And number 4, in an ideal world, we think that all investing should be impact investing, and that companies should really be aiming to maximize stakeholder value as opposed to just focusing on profit. The work of IFBI rests on a very clear mandate. In its December 2021 report titled Time to Deliver, the G7 Impact Task Force stated that we should be working towards a world in which decisions are thoroughly informed not only by risk and return like they are currently, but also by impact. The task force states an urgent call for mandatory accounting of impact as a destination and for a deeper understanding of how impact and value and profit are related. So why do we need impact accounting? I think the answer is fairly straightforward. I think we need impact accounting because it is essential for the development of capital markets that are driven by sustainability considerations. Much like the development of the financial accounting infrastructure that we use today globally has been a necessary condition for the development of today's large-scale capital markets. I think overall impact accounting solves 3 main challenges of the current ESG measurement landscape. First and foremost, instead of just capturing only company inputs and activities, impact accounting can actually capture and translate all types of social and environmental impacts into comparable units that business managers and investors can intuitively understand in the language of currency. Secondly, it helps us to meaningfully aggregate and compare ESG impacts using common currency in order to be decision useful. And lastly, in an ideal world, we hope that we are able to rely on publicly available methodologies. A lot of this is still under development, but this is the goal, that this relies on publicly available methodologies as well as publicly available data for increased transparency and replicability. The Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative at Harvard Business School was able to test and to pilot impact accounting with a variety of companies as well as with investors. So how did we do this? Essentially, we started off with materiality assessment and an identification of potential impacts that are caused or contributed to by the business. The way that we define impact is as a change in the well-being of a stakeholder of a company as a result of the operations or decisions of that company. It can result in the change of the well-being of a stakeholder. It can either increase or decrease the types of capital or stocks of value. And lastly, it can occur at various points in the value chain of the economy. So we start by taking a holistic look across all affected stakeholders, whether it's a customer, an employee of the company, upstream workers, local communities, and everything in between. And we assess how each group is impacted by the company's activities at each stage of the value chain. In addition, we look at all possible types of capital, as shown on the bottom right of this image, including financial to natural to human and social capital. The second step in the process is to develop an impact pathway for each of the impacts identified in the previous step. So we define an impact pathway as the sequence of events that link an entity's actions with its effects on people and on the environment. So this diagram at the top illustrates what an impact pathway looks like. Starting from the left-hand side, you start with impact drivers, which are essentially the inputs and outputs of a company. An input represents the resources that the company draws upon for its activities, and an output is basically the direct result of a company's activities, including the products and services that it has, as well as any resulting byproducts or production waste. You then take the outcome of those inputs and the outputs. The outcome is defined as basically the resulting level of well-being experienced either by a particular stakeholder or the resulting condition on the environment as a result of that output. You then take that outcome, and you compare it to the reference scenario. The reference scenario or counterfactual outcome is essentially the assumption of what would have happened in the absence of the entity's actions. You take the difference between the two, and then you multiply that by a robust valuation coefficient or valuation factor, as it's commonly known, and then you end up getting that monetary value of that impact in dollar terms or in any other currency. So to illustrate what this looks like for 3 examples, we can take a well-defined metric. So in the case of tons of CO2 or average wages paid, or even the sugar content within a consumer packaged goods portfolio. For each of these metrics, you can then extrapolate the impact on varying stakeholders and determine in monetary terms, for example, in the case of CO2, what the expected incremental damage to human and ecosystem health from every additional ton of carbon dioxide would be. Or in the case of sugar, for example, you could assess in monetary terms what the incidence of disease caused by excess of sugar intake, for example, would be. So this diagram is a little bit of more of a detailed illustration of what I was talking about in the previous slide, where we show how we have used impact accounting for the valuation of corporate environmental impacts. In this case, specifically, GHG emissions and water consumption is what is illustrated here. So for the first 2 columns, the inputs and outputs, we rely on data that is reported directly by companies or by data provided by providers like Bloomberg, Refinitiv, CDP, and many others. And then also for the third column, which is the monetary valuation factors, we are also relying on existing coefficients that have been developed by research institutions and other standard setters. So really the role that IFBI and our partners in our ecosystem and impact accounting have to play is more on the right-hand side of this diagram. For the rest, we are absolutely aligning and building off of existing disclosure frameworks and standards that have already been set, and are simply adding that layer on top on how really do we drive further harmonization and standardization of how the valuation and the monetary the translation into monetary terms is done. So really our role, again, is kind of on the right-hand side of this diagram. We are, of course, part of a very large ecosystem of players here. So in terms of what this might look like at the end, so this slide showcases a prototype of a monetary impact account statement. Just disclaimer, this is completely illustrative at this point. Specific terminology, specific concepts and ideas and templates around this are still under development. So again, this is just for illustrative purposes. But essentially, what we envision as the end goal of this process, in addition to this information obviously influencing and being embedded into decision making, is to be able to see some sort of integrated profit and loss statement where you can measure and compare impacts across stakeholders in monetary terms and make these impacts comparable and interoperable with financial information. Conceptually, I think the idea is that we would be able to internalize all costs that are currently seen as externalities of a company and to adjust the profits of a company for the positive and the negative impacts that it has on society and its stakeholders. So taking this approach to corporate valuation really results, I think, in a share price for companies that reflects the total value created for society as opposed to just the value created for investors, for lenders, or for creditors. So as I was mentioning earlier, the Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative at Harvard really did a lot of extensive piloting and testing with a number of companies and investors. And in this slide, I'm just showing a few examples of how we have seen this play out in real life. So in the case of investors, for example, we worked with an Australian pension fund to examine what the monetized environmental and employment impact of its most sustainable fund was, and used it as a tool for capital allocation and for advocacy. In terms of companies, a couple of examples here. There's dozens of others, but these are two that we wanted to highlight. So Eisai, a Tokyo-based pharmaceutical company, actually adopted the employment impact-weighted accounting as a tool to analyze and communicate performance. Acciona, a Spanish multinational conglomerate, also used impact-weighted accounting for all new capex and project decisions. And then lastly, more from the public sector perspective, the Fresno, California Economic Development Corporation is using impact-weighted accounts as a fundamental component in their scorecard initiative in order to improve and inform economic decision-making and allocation of capital. In addition to this, the Impact-Weighted Accounts Project in 2020 published a study where we applied our environmental impact methodology to calculate the total environmental impact of over 2,500 companies across a wide range of industries with data going back to 2010. And I think one of the most interesting findings of this study was that out of over 2,500 companies, a total of 860 created more environmental damage than operating profit. And on top of that, out of these 2,500 companies, a total of 1,445 companies delivered environmental damage that was equivalent to a quarter or more of their profit. Again, the application of these methodologies so far has illustrated a lot of really interesting insights, and we've been able to prove that impact accounting is both feasible and valuable for a range of stakeholders. To conclude my presentation, I just wanted first and foremost to thank you all for the opportunity to present at this very important forum. We launched last year, so we have been focused this past year on growing the organization and really laying a strong foundation and strategy for our research and our market uptake work. We have an extremely ambitious research agenda ahead of us and have also established key partnerships with organizations like the Value Balancing Alliance and others to further drive harmonization of impact accounting methodologies and also help drive further adoption and scalability of impact valuation through more pilots and through tools and educational resources. So we're excited to continue to share more information as we continue to grow and to expand in this space. So I would encourage you, all of you, if you have any questions on our research, our work, or our future plans, please don't hesitate to get into contact with me. Here's my email on this slide. And also for more updates on our work, we regularly post updates on our LinkedIn page. So I encourage you all to follow us there as well. Thank you all, and I look forward to connecting with some of you, hopefully in the near future.
So thanks to Andrea. And she told us about the monetary valuation factor. For stable economies, I don't think it would be a very tough thing to do, but for Türkiye, for very changing dynamics and environment, it would be a factor that would create some bias as deviation. So, okay, now we're proceeding with Tom. Tom is from 60 Decibels, and he is the co-founder and chief strategy officer. So 60 Decibels is actually gathering data, impact data from and by real people. So it produces fast and standardized reports based on the actionable, benchmarked social impact data for corporations, investors, funders, NGOs, and social enterprises. And they worked on 2023 MFI index, which has gathered over 1 million unique global data points for the microfinance industry. So we asked Tom about this index and to share with us some key findings or insights from this index that have been particularly eye-opening or impactful. And also, we asked him about their plans to expand its work and influence more sectors to adopt actionable and benchmark social impact reporting. So let's hear about him. It's also a first time for the panelists, so they did a great job.
Hi everyone. My name's Tom Adams. I am the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of 60 Decibels, and I'm thrilled to join you at this Impact Measurement and Management Summit. I'm going to talk to you a bit about who we are and the work that we do, and then give you some practical examples of what this means in terms of the data we collect. So, at essence, we're a very, very simple company. We are focused squarely on a North Star of speaking to and listening to the people who do or do not experience the impact we're all trying to create. And there are some really good reasons for this. Whilst a lot of the work on impact measurement and management has relied on proxy, and by proxy I mean collecting output data of the number of people once reached, and then using maybe a third-party piece of research to say, well, look, this validates that this kind of impact should, in theory, happen, and these are the sorts of impacts that people might experience. That validator impact, and so now let's just count the number of people who we've reached. That is only ever going to give you a decent approximation of the impact. And the unquestionably most effective way to validate your social performance is to listen directly to those people that you impact. And think about it in terms of financial performance. You would not dream of saying, well, look, I'll use a proxy margin from another company and say, well, this company's in a similar sector, that's the margin that they've got. So I'm going to apply that to this business over here and assume that their margin is the same way. And yet we kind of do that with social impact. And so we need to listen directly to people who are experiencing impact so that we can get better data on social performance to validate the social performance we all aim to have. And the second point, I use this word performance very deliberately. Performance requires that we compare ourselves to other organisations or past performance. Just think about it, say you're running a race, right? You can't tell your performance if you just measured your own time. You'd say, well, I felt like I was going really, really fast, so I must be a fast runner. Then you turn up against professional athletes and they wipe the floor with you. If you, and we kind of do that for social impact. We say, these are the targets we've set for ourselves. This is our performance. And we put that in a nice infographic. We don't ever compare it to other peer organisations who are trying to create a similar kind of impact. And understanding performance requires building these benchmarks for social performance, and that's one of our absolutely foundational principles. We also do some work in the same way of thinking about social impact, looking at human rights risks, but I won't touch on that today. Well, how do we do that? As I mentioned, the North Star is to listen to people because they understand the impact they experience most. The second part is to design from the beginning for scale, and two features of that for us are to make sure that it's quick and it's standardized. A lot of social research focuses first on rigor, and they try to get it into an academic journal or something, in which case you've got to do something new and different, and we kind of got used to that in terms of the idea of evaluations. And instead, what we've tried to do is say, well, look, we need to standardize and scale social performance so everyone can access it. It's ended up being, the approach we've used is 15-minute, phone-based, standardized surveys. And the phone is key because these days virtually everyone all over the world has access to a mobile phone, which was not necessarily the case when we first started this work. There are lots of different ways you can contact people by phone, by SMS, by IDR, by text, but we've found that actually a person-to-person conversation is the most effective at asking the sorts of questions we do around social research to both collect qualitative and quantitative data. So we've built a network of research assistants, more than 800 now, more than 1,000 now in 88 countries. And by using a standardized survey with dozens, sometimes hundreds of organizations at the same time, we can then collect the same standardized data and create performance benchmarks, which often are indices, like our Microfinance Impact Index, which is now used by its first year. Our work is done on an annual basis, so people do repeat this data collection over again, just like their financial accounts. In our first year, 70 odd organisations used it. In our second year, we've got more than 150 20 financial service providers all collecting the same data. What is this data? Well, it's over 5 impact themes, and these are financial access, business impacts, household impacts, financial management, and financial resilience, all reported by the people that are taking loans through FSPs. There is a 6th impact theme that some organisations use around financial autonomy. There are 18 indicators, outcome indicators underneath this index, and these are all aggregated up into a single index. And then you can look at the performance of all of the MFIs. And when we first started, we were somewhat concerned that actually, because these are fairly homogeneous product, the impact performance might be quite standardized. And then maybe you would want to just use proxies, it wouldn't be worth collecting this data. But what we've seen is that there's huge variation in impact performance, which might be down to the execution of the loan, the loan officers, the marketing strategy, the way in which the terms of the loan are explained. And each of these areas has an impact on the social performance. And so organisations that are at the top of our performance benchmarks are doing these things potentially better or more effectively than those that are lower down. And there's therefore opportunities for those that are lower down the index to learn from and improve their performance. Each organisation is given an individual scorecard against all the different indicators, and they can start to see areas of strength, potentially areas of weakness about the impacts they're creating, and they can think about strategies in terms of their impact management to improve them. We're now scaling these products beyond microfinance. We have products for off-grid energy, for smallholder farmers and food systems, for quality jobs, for workforce development, and a host of other areas. And by more and more firms adopting these standardized survey tools, where we speak to a statistically significant representative group of clients with 10 to 15 minute phone-based conversation, return that data in 12 weeks. As more and more organisations get that kind of data, we're going to see a higher and higher bar for what it really means to do proper impact measurement and management. And if we all start to adopt these kind of standards, then we'll learn more, there'll be more collective impact intelligence about what works, why, and where. There'll be more accountability with respect to who is getting top performance, and as a result of which the sector itself will start to create even more impact. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you really enjoy the rest of the conference.
So great findings. We can access the report also as this 2023 MFI index. So now we're having our 5th panelist, Mike McCrillis from Impact Frontiers. And he is the executive director. And I would like to share some information about the Impact Frontiers. It's a peer learning and market building collaboration supporting investors in pioneering new ways to integrate impact alongside financial risk and return on investment practices. So we wanted we requested Mike to share some information about the Impact Frontiers programs. They have very good programs, and so we want to share with us some common challenges that asset owners and managers face during impact investment journey, and how does Impact Frontiers support them in overcoming these challenges. So now we're going to hear Mike.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. It's so wonderful to be a part of this great event, and I'd like to congratulate TED University and the Impact Investing Advisory Board of Turkey for their leadership in bringing all of this together. I'll briefly introduce Impact Frontiers and then talk about some opportunities for ways that we would love to work with all of you. My name is Mike McCrillis. I'm the founder and the executive director of Impact Frontiers. Impact Frontiers is a nonprofit that supports investors to improve their skills at impact management, and especially to integrate impact alongside financial risk and return in investment decision making. We started out at Root Capital, a social investment fund where I was head of impact for 9 years. As we grew, we migrated to the Impact Management Project, or IMP, and incubated this initiative within the IMP from 2019 to 2021. The IMP was a 5-year project that concluded at the end of 2021, and so now Impact Frontiers is continuing on as the steward of the 5 dimensions of impact and other norms facilitated by the IMP practitioner community. We continue to manage those norms and even to oversee the evolution and building of new concepts into that set of norms in the future. We also work with Kathy Clark, whom I know is there with you in Turkey, as I wish I could be, to offer a cohort training program for investors, a guided do-it-yourself approach to help investors build their own impact management practices over the course of a full year in partnership with Impact Frontiers, with Kathy, and with a group of like-minded investors all on a similar journey, all seeking to improve their own practice of impact management and build a community and learn from one another. To date, we've facilitated more than 10 cohorts with over 100 investors participating from all over the world, and we would love to have the opportunity to work with the leading investors in Turkey as well. As I mentioned, we also facilitate field building efforts to advance new practices of impact management. Last year and this year, we're focusing on 4 areas. The first is investor contribution, meaning the impact that the investor has on companies, whether it's through the capital they provide or the non-financial ways in which they engage with companies. For instance, by taking a seat on the board and providing technical assistance. We're just now concluding a process of public consultation on ways that investors can measure and manage and disclose their own investor contribution, and you can find the most recent resources under Investor Contribution 2.0 on our website. The second topic is impact ratings. We cover this in the cohort program, so I won't speak about it now. The third is just jumping up this month on impact performance reporting and verification. And we're about to launch a new public consultation on a new set of draft norms for impact performance reporting by investors and also for the verification and or assurance of those impact performance reports by third parties. And this is an area where we would really love to benefit from the insights and learnings of the impact investing community in Turkey so that we can truly have a global set of norms around impact performance reporting by investors. And lastly, I would love to draw your attention to the open access version of our online curriculum that all of you can complete on your own time in Turkey, even if you're not even a part of a cohort. And that's, again, something that you can find on our website. Across all of our work, we seek to change the mindset of impact management from being something that investors do just to check the box to being something that you do because it brings you closer to the impact that people on the planet are experiencing, and something that helps you make the best decisions that you can with those impacts in mind. There's a risk we find that impact management turns into a performative check-the-box exercise instead of an authentic engagement with the people in the natural environment affected by our investments. And we find that approaching impact management from a decision-making perspective is one of the best ways to do it authentically. As impact investors, sometimes it feels like we have 2 sides of our brain. We have the financial side and the impact side, but we're only able to think with one part of our brain at a time. As impact investors, we need to be able to think with both sides of our brain simultaneously, a way to make the disciplines of impact management and investment management interoperable. In this curriculum, we'll approach impact as part of an integrated practice that also includes financial considerations. In our cohort program and in our online curriculum, we work with investors to collect data on the impact of their investments and on financial risk and return and combine them so that they can begin to visualize all of the dimensions, not just the 5 dimensions of impact or the dimensions of financial risk and return, but all of the dimensions together to understand the integrated performance of investments, and so that investors can make decisions based on an integrated understanding of all of those aspects of performance. Using impact for decision making often means integrating impact alongside the existing financial considerations in decision making. Impact financial integration enables impact for decision making. As part of the cohorts, I can give you a sneak peek. We ask 3 central questions of all of the investors that we work with. We don't give them the answers, but we work with them to develop the tools to come to their own answers, using their own data for their own investment strategies in their own context. The 3 questions are easy to ask, but hard to answer. The first, which investments offer more or less impact? The second, which investments offer more or less risk-adjusted financial return? And third, how can you use the answers to these questions to improve the impact and or the financial performance of your portfolio over time? And we use a 5-step process to help investors develop their own answers to these questions. The first and second steps involve setting up systems to determine, for instance, to build an impact rating to decide which investments offer more or less of the type of impacts that your organization is looking to create. And then building a financial preference ranking that does the same on the financial side. In step 3, we bring the 2 sides together to create what we call integrated scatter plots, which use the investment's impact rating on one axis and the financial rating on the other to map both dimensions of performance on a single chart. We can then move to the final 2 steps, analyzing integrated scatter plots to identify insights to inform future investment decisions, and to measure, manage, and communicate both the impact and the financial performance of your portfolios in an integrated way. We would love to have the opportunity to work with all of you and support your leadership and your growth in the coming years, whether through our open access skill building initiatives, through our cohort curriculum with Kathy Clark, and other ways that perhaps you haven't even thought of. To start, I would love to share with you the link to our homepage and invite you to sign up for our newsletter at impactfrontiers.org/contact, and then explore some of the ways that you can begin to participate in the discussions on impact management that are happening around the world. I've included on the right side a screenshot of some of the discussion board topics that are going right now on systems change, on impact ratings, on the ABC of impact, on impact performance report verification, investor contribution, and other topics. I hope that the coming years bring us closer together and provide more opportunities to work together. In the meantime, I'd like to congratulate all of the impact investors in the Turkish ecosystem for the great progress to date, and wish you a wonderful second day of your event. Thank you.
So, thanks to Mike. It was really great presentation, and so as you can see, we try to cover all the different perspectives and also frameworks, practices. And the last one, our last speaker is Courtney Roberts. And Courtney is the CEO and the Executive Director of Moonshot Global Consulting. They are active in the field since 2014, and they have some flagship products like third-party verification of impact and also portfolio impact strategy. So as a last speaker, we're going to listen Courtney together.
Hello, my name is Courtney Roberts and I'm CEO of Moonshot Global. Before I begin, a big thank you to the Impact Investment Advisory Board and TED University for organizing and hosting this summit. I am grateful to join fellow IMM strategists, practitioners, and investors, and to have the opportunity to share Moonshot's experiences on this panel. I founded Moonshot in 2014 to help ensure that sustainability and impact are at the core of investment and development finance, and to do so as a voice calling for IMM and assurance rigor, balanced by pragmatism. With the wider range of actors from the public, private, and third sectors coming together to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, to fill the staggering $4 trillion gap in sustainable development finance, it is essential that standards and frameworks be supported by tools and approaches at each step in the investment or project cycle. I will address two key questions in this presentation to provide insights into the challenge of post-investment IMM. The first question is, how does Moonshot assist investors and organizations in effectively measuring and assessing the long-term impact of their initiatives? And the second, how can this assistance be tailored to meet the needs and expectations of each client? First, measuring and assessing long-term impact and outcomes starts at the earliest stages, even before making the investment or starting the project. It starts by working to embed impact processes based on a set of IMM practice standards throughout the investment or project cycle, and to do so at the portfolio, program, and investment or project levels. This is the ideal approach no matter the type of client, investment strategy, or asset class. If IMM practice follows foundational processes that are articulated across the various standards, then measuring long-term outcomes and impact is simply a final step to verify the impact performance of the investment or project. A final step that answers the very important question, are your investments or projects generating the social impact they promised? Unlike for IMM practice, there are not widely accepted standards for measuring impact performances at this stage. There also is not much alignment on what are acceptable levels of impact performance or what value to place on impact. There are a number of organizations working on aspects of these challenges, including my fellow panelists. Moonshot's approach to impact performance verification is based on a pragmatic approach to applying rigorous evaluation standards to impact investing. Moonshot's methodology is a mixed methods approach that combines three fundamental elements. Now let's move over to some slides to visualize the steps. 3 steps are conducting a desk review, assessing data quality and verifying the impact, and calculating a value for the impact. Additional considerations are assessing the risk of negative externalities, identifying corrective actions, and submitting a verification report to the client. Let's dig a little deeper in each of the steps. First, we conduct a desk review of existing monitoring data that are associated with the review. This includes all relevant investment or project documentation. For example, the impact thesis, the theory of change, key performance indicators, stakeholder engagement information, beneficiary data, etc. On the side of this slide, also are listed key questions to answer in reviewing this data. The second step is a combination of a data quality assessment and verification of data. We assess data for quality, context, and completeness against an objective set of data validity and reliability questions drawn from best practice. We then conduct a qualitative and quantitative review of what investment or project beneficiaries say about what they have experienced. What can be linked in some way to the intervention that was supported by the investment or project? Ideally, this would be done using a statistically valid sample and in person, but budget and timeline often limits this step to a smaller number of respondents or to remote data collection. There are methodological limitations to truncating this step, but I can say definitively that some verification is far better than skipping this step over concerns that the sample isn't statistically significant. Those Those first two steps we view as the minimal approach to verification of impact performance. We also include a third element in our approach, applying expertise to review evidence against standards and provide a value for the impact. We recommend that the value be composed of an evidence-based monetization of the impact that can be verified and then adjusted up or down based on the application of the social value placed on the impact by the beneficiary. We apply Social Value International's methodology to measure this. Taking this approach consistently across investments may help investors compare the relative value of their impact portfolio and inform their investment decisions. Now I'll stop sharing and I'll provide you two examples of how we applied the methodology. First was for a private sector impact investor who was using a pay-for-results approach in the water and sanitation sector. We conducted an independent verification of impact for this client following their methodology. We had to make some compromises from our comprehensive approach, which they recognized, but they were constrained with resources. Their mechanism pays investees for results against pre-agreed metrics and targets, and our job as impact performance verifier was to review the investees' data collection processes and the data quality against data verification standards. They chose to have us use the Donor Committee for Enterprise Development's checklist. We then supplemented the investees' data with field visits to conduct a small sample of face-to-face interviews to sense check the data. It was not statistically significant, but it definitely was direct to beneficiary communication. Then we wrote up the findings and any corrective actions and made recommendations on whether the investees should receive full or partial payment for their performance. A second case was one of a public sector client who engaged us to develop a portfolio-level impact framework across all of their development finance activities and to prioritize a core set of what we call apex metrics, which they wished to create and use to aggregate performance across their entire portfolio. The apex indicators were a small number relative to the total number that were tracked by the individual investments, and our main work was harmonizing the metrics across all of the individual investments and then benchmarking impact performance by reviewing the available data against other verified sources. This was a significant effort, primarily because the work to establish the common set of indicators, the apex indicators at the portfolio level, had not been done up front. So we had to conduct a data call from existing implementing partners managing the investments, retrofit the data, and build consensus around what were the most important metrics. We also suggested some new metrics that hadn't been consistently captured by all investments, and that required some primary data collection. Among the apex indicators we proposed was an overall measure of effectiveness that we articulated as, did the projects achieve the outcomes they set out to achieve? This question enabled the client to more easily aggregate performance on outcomes across a diverse portfolio. After we completed the exercise, the client declared that they were then ready to establish a more consistent approach to going deeper and verifying post-investment impact performance by conducting a spot check on the data from investments, validating those results, capturing beneficiary feedback on them. That sums up the examples that I wanted to share. And I really wanted to thank you for attention as I described our approach to impact performance verification. I'd like to wrap up by saying that impact performance verification is very complex and not yet widespread, but it's a key mechanism to avoid impact washing and ensure accountability to the different stakeholders that investors and investees engage with. I hope that you found this presentation interesting and that you can have a takeaway or two that you can apply to your own work. I also want to emphasize that impact performance verification not only backs up claims through independent review, but it also provides investors and investees with information that can be applied to learning and improvement, and ultimately to inform the delivery of impact, not only that's been intended, but that has actually been verifiably delivered. Thank you so much.
So that's all. Courtney, as the last speaker, shared with us very sincere and very specific details that accumulated through a decade-long expertise. So it was very valuable. Thank you. So as a closure, before the closure remarks, I would like to put some sticky notes on your minds and invite you to sleep on them, because we would like to make you ready for the second day. The second day will be having workshops and panels full of very key leading figures all across the ecosystem. So I just took some notes. The first one is Karim told us that impact management should be framed as a dynamic activity. It should look back, look ahead, and look beyond. And Nico just highlighted that they believe in the positive approach and they reward for positive practices. And Andrea highlighted a very, very important thing. It highlighted the importance of public reporting and taught that public reporting of impact is necessary, is crucial for economic system change and paradigm shift. And also, I would like to bring forward Mike's presentation and this funny figure that will also stick our minds, that having two sides of the brain that needs to work together, the impact management and investment management. So I would like to have an applause for yourselves, because you're here with great interest still. Thank you for coming here and being with us. And we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a good night. Ben teşekkür ederim.